members standing, why I ask the leader of the council to say this, please.
Lord, we are meeting this evening to discuss matters of importance to our communal life and to make decisions which will impact on those whom we seek to represent. We pray that our deliberations may take place in a spirit of fairness, wisdom and courtesy to one another. Although we may disagree during the debates, teach us the importance of valuing each other's contribution. And when we leave this meeting, persuade us to put aside our differences, remembering that we are brought together by a common goal, and that there is far more that unites us than divides us. Amen.
Good evening, everybody. We begin with item number 1, and we any declarations of our interest, please. No. Councillor Rhodes.
Item number 7, Mr. Mayor. I've been advised I should declare a personal interest to this, and I will be abstaining.
Thank you. Councillor Hayhurst.
Well, Mr. Mayor, it's the same item and for the same reason. As a county councillor, I've been advised to declare a personal interest and not to take part in the debate or vote on the issue. So I will be abstaining as well.
Thank you. Anyone else? Thank you. Item 2. I propose from the Chair that the minutes of the previous meeting held on 14th of December 2015 be confirmed as a correct record. Sorry.
It gives me pleasure to second those minutes, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Item 3, the Mayor's announcement. I'd like to thank those councillors who came to the charity night a week last Sunday at the Dalmini. It was an excellent night. May I remind you, my mayoral ball is on Friday the 11th of March at Ribby Hall. It would be nice to see as many as possible go to that. That's Ribby Hall, Friday the 11th of March. Thank you. That's all I think for me. Mayor's announcements. Item 4, Chief Executive's communications. Are there any communications to report from you, Mr. Moorfield?
None this evening, thank you, Chairman.
Item 5. Are there any questions from members of the council this evening? No questions tonight, thank you. Item 6, questions from members of the public. Are there any questions from members? No questions from members of the public, thank you. Item number 7, notice of motion. Consultation period regarding the proposed closure of libraries and museums by Lancashire County Council. I'd like to invite Councillor Ashton to introduce this notice of motion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do have a seconder. I just like to say that I think this is a non-party political issue, and I hope it's seen in that vein. The County Council, in its wisdom, has decided to to split the county into what's called 34 service planning areas. And in each of those service planning areas, it is intended to have one library only. At the current time, there are 74 libraries in Lancashire. So if you subtract 34 from 74, it means that 40 libraries are due to close with the current proposal. And clearly that's going to have a massive impact on this service throughout the county council area. Bear in mind there are 84 county councillors, each covering a division. So it gives you the scale of these changes. Now, the county council has gone through an initial consultation, which lasted 4 weeks over the January period, and it intends having another consultation period for about 8 weeks to the end of March. And my view is that this quite simply is not long enough to come up with some alternatives for the provision of libraries in Lancashire. Now, in Fylde we have 5 libraries, 3 in Lytham St Anne's and 1 in Freckleton and 1 in Kirkham. Now, Lytham St Anne's itself is one of the 34 service plan areas that I mentioned. So clearly, from 3, there's intended to be 1 library left between Lytham St Anne's and Ansdell. Now, my belief is, I'm not absolutely sure of this, but I think Freckleton and Kirkham are lumped in with Broughton of all places, one of these service plan areas. So what's going to happen there, I really don't know. What I will say is that the library service post-2016 will be different to the library service now, and it quite rightly it should be. It should be delivered differently. Now, the other thing I'm concerned about is the museum service in Lancashire. We don't have any of Lancashire museums in Fylde, but obviously the people of Fylde do use the museums, and they are really a very treasured part of the cultural offer in Lancashire, and some of the massive, rich history in Lancashire. And I think it's an insult for people who look after these museums and support them to only give them effectively 12 weeks to come up with an alternative way of running these services. And the other thing is, the library service is what we call a universal service. In other words, it's open to all people. Anyone can use libraries, and it's effectively going to be a targeted service. If we're going to have 1 library in each of these 34 service plan areas, then we're actually targeting what is a universal service at the moment. And incidentally, these service plan areas, how they've been brought about is they're based on deprivation. So the use deprivation indicators to come up with these 34 areas. Now, I don't need to tell members how valuable libraries are, but what I would point you to, if you are interested, is the Carnegie Trust website. I think it's carnegietrust.org. And they come up with 4 main headings for libraries: a social hub, a learning hub, an economic enabler, and a cultural centre. Now, libraries for me, non-threatening environment, a place that's safe for people to visit of all ages, young and old, a place where you can get information, borrow books, use the internet, need I go on. The reason I brought this to Fylde today is that we have a budget meeting on Thursday at Lancashire, and I really would implore the Chief Executive, if this goes through, to get this letter to the County Council before Thursday. Lancaster City Council have done exactly the same thing. They have written to the County Council in the same vein. I'm not saying keep all 74 libraries open. That clearly is not going to be possible in the current climate. What I'm saying is give the people, the users, the people who are interested in this service, a chance to come up with an alternative. And there will be alternatives, whether it's the private sector, charities, volunteers, public sector. It could be a variety of those methodologies that could be used. And I'm saying give these people a chance. And really what we need is 12 months, not 12 weeks. That will give ample time to look at these services and come up with alternative proposals. Because I know there's a will out there. A lot of people value these services and will come up and step up to the plate and come with alternatives. So simply by allowing Fylde Council to write to Lancashire to show that we agree that the consultation period is simply not long enough, 12 weeks is just inadequate, it's an insult in my opinion to the people who use these libraries, and it should be 12 months. So as I say, I do second those. Thank you.
Mr Mayor, I'm happy to second the notice of motion. Anyway, Councillor Silverwood.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Ashton, for bringing this as a notice of motion tonight, and I do think, yes, it is very important to be heard. I do agree with you that it should be a non-political item. I hope that's also how the next notice of motion will be looked at as well. I think that also should be non-political. Yeah, the figures, they're quite shuddering, aren't they, to be potentially losing 40 libraries and also the threat to the museums. Of course, I know about the Carnegie that you referred to. When you're talking about the Fylde sending a letter to county, because it's being discussed on Thursday, we all know this has been in the pipeline for ages. We all know it's been going on. Unless you're an ostrich and burying your head, it's a silly thing to think it would go away. What I would like to ask you, Councillor Ashton, with your county councillor hat on, some of the things you've mentioned in the notice of motion here, the options to be considered, charitable trust, private sector, voluntary sector and partnerships. At what stage are we at county with your hat on? What work have you been doing behind the scenes, please?
Thank you. It's good to take the opportunity to endorse many of the comments that Councillor Ashton has already made. None of us are dishonest enough tonight to deny the fact that Lancashire County Council are in a situation where they have to save significant sums of money, 256 million, I believe. And clearly they have to look at every public service that they're involved in, including the library service. But why this particular motion is so important and so critical is that there must be other options other than closing the very vital organs that we describe as libraries in our communities. There must be other ways of finding what I like to describe as a creative solution, other than just the rather draconian measure, an unimaginative measure of closing down a whole institution. Now, that requires real engagement between councils and Lancashire County Council, between the local population and people who care about libraries. For that engagement to have a real sense of purpose and for a positive outcome to come out of that, we must have an extended period of time, because creative solutions are not arrived at in a few weeks. Communities have to be given time to explore all the options available to them. And I would say to Lancashire County Council, it is very much in their interest to give communities time to respond and actually help them with one of the problems that they have, i.e. running libraries at huge cost. I have to say, on a personal level, that when I look at my own community in Ansell, which I see as an urban village, and I look at other villages in the Fylde, who all have their own community facilities, for example, village halls. In Ansell, we don't have any of those facilities. Guess what? Our community facility, our community centre is Ansell Library. And because of that, there is an opportunity there to use the way in which currently our building is being used and to extend that use. And also extend it in such a way that it can actually generate further income and reduce the cost to Lancashire County Council. We could have a library presence in many libraries sustained over a long period of time. But we need time to come up with these creative solutions. So I feel very passionate very passionately about this notice of motion, that we should get the time to be able to work with LCC to find a way of maintaining library provision and library presence, but at the same time doing it at reduced costs and thinking creatively, imaginatively, how these buildings can be used for a variety of purposes. So I hope people support this notice of motion.
Anyone else would like to speak on the motion? Sorry.
Thanks everyone. All of those points I take on board, all very valid. I don't think we're going to get 12 months on this. I'm wondering whether Councillor Ashton thinks it would be a good idea to look for a compromise at saying 6 months. Would that be possible?
Anyone else? Councillor Ashton, would you like to sum up, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, what I will say, in answer to a couple of questions, was the second, I believe the second consultation, which hasn't started, it's delayed, I believe it's going to be ready for, I think, the end of this week, is that expressions of interest will be asked for. So the likes of the Friends of Ansell Library, maybe Friends of St Anne's Library, because those are the only two friends groups we've got out of the 5 libraries, they may well be asked to come up with an expression of interest. In answer to Councillor Silverwood's question, I've met with the Friends, or representatives from the Friends of Ansell Library to talk about where I think it should go, and we had a full and frank discussion. I've also got a meeting on Friday with some of the interested groups at the Lytham Library to talk about what we can do. Incidentally, Lytham Library, the building itself, Great Two Listed, is owned by Fylde Council, just happens at Lancashire rent space, or space from the Borough Council. So obviously we have a vested interest there as a borough, because half of the running costs are paid for by the county. What I'm also doing with our arts partnership group, which is the Fylde Arts Partnership, we're hoping to have an event in March at all the libraries to raise awareness of what's going on with libraries. I mean, Councillor Silverwood said most people know about the impending closure of libraries. They don't actually. A lot of people aren't aware of it. This last consultation was a bit lacklustre. It didn't really say anything. And I think we need to raise awareness so the public do know what's going on, and this position is going forward. As for having a compromise between the 12 and 6 months, 6 months isn't long enough. It has to be 12 months. We've already had a month of consultation. We need much longer to come up with a proposal. And it may well be a whole of Lancashire Trust. I mean, the budget savings from about 12 million eventually down to about 6 million for the libraries and museums. And I'm sure that with some sort of a following wind and some will and some support, that something can come out of it and we can have a library service that we can be proud of. As I say, it's not going to be the same. It can be different, to be delivered differently. It maybe have to work in partnership with others, but I'm sure we can do it. The people of Lancashire deserve it. Something else, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. With that, we shall go to the vote. All those in favour of the motion, please show. Any against? It is clearly carried. Thank you. Item number 8, a notice of motion, 5-year housing supply. I'd like to invite Councillor Peter Collins to introduce this motion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is another item which I hope will be non-political too. I propose that, with immediate effect, this Council adopts the Liverpool approach in applying the shortfall in the delivery of the objectively assessed need, OIN, identified in the Housing Requirement Paper 2015 to the calculation of Fyle's 5-year housing supply position, i.e. the shortfall will be applied over the plan period and not over the first 5 years of the second approach. Councillors, there is a need for housing. and this council plays its part in ensuring enough sites are available to enable developers to fulfil that need. The need for Fylde stands at 370 dwellings a year to the end of the plan period 2032. The 5-year requirement, the way we have to work it out, stands at 2,220 dwellings. This is the supply of deliverable sites that should be in place to enable developers to deliver 370 dwellings a year. But there's been a shortfall in delivery in the first 4 years of this plan period, up to 31st of March last year. There was 745 out of 1,480 dwellings delivered. That's just over half. A shortfall of 735. Now, how do we address this shortfall? Guidance to the MPPF says, where possible, this shortfall should be delivered in the next 5 years of the plan period. The shortfall is 735, divided by 5, that's an extra 147 extra dwellings per year for the next 5 years, on top of the 370 that should be built anyway. Is it realistic to expect that, on average, the delivery will now be 517 new dwellings every year for the next 5 years, but in the first 4 years, the average delivery is 186 per year. In order to achieve this rate of delivery, we have to add the 735 to the 2,220 we already have in our 5-year supply requirement, making it now 2,955. This Sedgefield method is the method used by Fylde. But applying the shortfall to the next 5 years of the plan period sets an impossible target for the developers to deliver, and also inflates our housing requirement figure unnecessarily. Less than 12 months ago, I attended the last meeting held of the Schlar Steering Group with Councillor Aiken, who were there as observers. The pessimism amongst developers was such that initial rates of delivery from all large housing projects, that's 10 or more, were revised downwards. It is nonsense to expect a higher delivery from lower delivery rates. Also at that meeting, the development industry advised that these lower delivery rates will well continue for some years. As I said, the guidance of the MPPF says where possible, the shortfall should be limited in the next 5 years of the plan period. But historical rates of delivery in Fylde show this to be a highly unlikely scenario. Between 1991 and 2014, the average delivery was approximately 250 dwellings per year. And the delivery in the first 4 years of this plan period is 186 per year. I do not believe we can deliver the objectively assessed need and the shortfall over the next 5 years of the plan period. Now, you don't have to look too far to find an authority using Liverpool's approach. Just down the road, our neighbours in Blackpool use the Liverpool approach. They arrived at their need figure using the same report as Fylde, the Fylde Coast Strategic Housing Market Assessment. They too have a shortfall. To address it by spreading it on the remainder of the plan period. They have had the examination of public and airport strategy, which has been found to be sound by the inspector. The High Court has ruled that both approaches are acceptable. This followed an appeal in Leicestershire in 2014, where an application had been refused by both the local planning authority and by the inspector on appeal. The local planning authority had used the Liverpool approach, and the developers of law homes had argued that the Sedgefield approach should be used. The inspector stated that the Sedgefield approach should be used where there is a serious shortage in supply, and that the Liverpool approach should be used where the shortage is not severe, or where the pattern and pace of housing provision planned for the borough is such that shortfalls in housing land supply in the early years of the plan period will be overcome later in the plan period. Is this not exactly the situation we have in Fylde, where employment land has been allocated in the revised preferred options, which has not yet been taken up? Do we not expect this land to be taken up later in the time period, and so increase the demand for housing? If so, we should be looking to use the Liverpool approach. If not, we should be revising our objectively assess need figure downwards. The objectively assessed need is stated as an average over the time period. But if more housing is going to be delivered later in the time period, it will look like there is a shortage in the early years when there is not. The inspector and High Court agreed that the Sedgefield approach should be used when there is a serious shortage in supply. Have we got a serious shortage of supply in fact? If we rework the figures in the last statement of housing supply using the Liverpool approach, we spread the shortfall on the rest of the time period at 735 divided by 17, that's from 2015 to 2032, 17 years, being trying to provide an extra 43 houses per year. 43 times 5 is 215 to be added to our requirement figure. So it is now 2,220 plus 215 or 2,435. The requirement is 2,435 and the adjusted supply figure is 2,524. There is not a serious shortage of supply. In fact, there is not a shortage at all. At 31st of March last year, our supply position was 5.2 years using the Liverpool approach. Using this Liverpool method, we are over the line, but only just. Further permissions will be granted to maintain the 5-year supply. Using the Liverpool method will put us in a much stronger position in opposing unwelcome and opportunistic developments throughout the country town. It is on the agenda tonight to discuss the corporate plan 2016 to 2020. But if you look at the existing corporate plan 2013 to 2016, one of the long-term plan outcomes is to achieve high-quality towns, villages and settlements that are benefiting from excellent planning decisions. This wording has been removed from the proposed new corporate plan. If this notice of motion is successful tonight, the DM committee will be better placed to make those excellent planning decisions. Councillors, I ask you to support this notice of motion in the word I accept.
Do you have a second?
I'm happy to second that.
Thank you, Councillor Norton.
I think I'll speak now on this issue. This 5-year supply has had a major impact on most of our communities for many years. It's certainly done. Sorry, so short. Did you hear that, or shall I start again?
You're fine, your microphone's back on. Thanks,
Right,
Councillor.
okay. Yeah, the 5-year supply has certainly dominated my life over, I can't remember how many years. And we seem to get nowhere with it. Or when we do, when we get nearer to it, it probably slips back again because properties have been built. We've seen so many developments approved in Fylde that it seems hard to believe that we cannot reach this magic figure. The truth is that there simply isn't the demand at this moment for the properties, and particularly the size of properties that are being built. I do believe that the figure we've set is far too high, but if we change to the Liverpool method, we can at least reach this figure and be in charge of at least part of our own destiny for our communities again. I know the government will demand that we do this, we do that, but at least if we can meet the magic 5-year supply figure, we will be a little bit in charge and we will have a bit of a breathing space to reassess our needs and our communities. So I'm happy to second this. I think Peter's put a very good case forward. I have looked into the Liverpool method and I've looked at the Sedgefield method, and I do feel that the Liverpool method is for us. It will need some looking into, but I feel that we could go forward with this. And in seconding that, I would like to ask for a recorded vote on this item, please.
Councillor Fylde.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I agree with a lot of the comments made by the proposal and secondary Councillors Collins and Dalton. And any attempt to reduce the impact of the 5-year supply policy, I will support. However, I have rehearsed on several occasions within this forum and within the DM committee just how draconian the 5-year housing supply figure is. But it was intended, the 5-year supply figure was brought in by the Labour government and has been vigorously supported by the present government. And it was intended to be draconian. Because as I think we're all aware, when we hear the pronouncements of people in Westminster ministers, they simply say, you will deliver houses. You will deliver houses. And the 5-year policy, as I say, is draconian and has led to us being unable to defend unwanted development in many of our settlements. However, when we first started to deal with the 5-year supply question, we were under the regime of the RSS, and new council will appreciate that, but I don't think I'll bore you by going into the history of it. And we did actually use the Liverpool methodology, which said that if you have a shortfall, which we did, because we had a moratorium and we had a recession, we applied the Liverpool methodology, which spread the delivery of that shortfall over the defined period. When localism came in, the RSS was abolished, and we determined our own housing figure, which was still in 70 houses per year. The shortfall, quite rightly described by Councillor Collins, as 735. And as said already, the Sedgefield methodology says deal with it, get rid of that shortfall within the first 5 years. The Liverpool methodology says spread it over the planned period, 2032. The difference between the two methodologies is 100 houses. And the proposal and secondary are quite correct. If we use the Liverpool methodology, it would really positively help to negate the draconian policy of 5-year supply. But we have a problem. That's not the government's agenda. And in the last 6 or 7 public inquiries that we've had, ourselves, through our barrister, the applicant's barrister, successive inspectors of these public inquiries have agreed that the methodology that Fylde should use is the Sedgefield one. Latest direction from government is that the Sedgefield methodology is the preferred direction dictated from government. The majority of inspectors throughout the country agree that Sedgefield is the methodology, the preferred methodology. Having said all that, I would like to make an amendment. And this council defers this item this evening to allow a full report to go to the DM committee. This would have to be prior to the 31st of March, because the council is directed by government to review its 5-year supply figure on that date, and the file then will be in a position to review its 5-year policy on the basis of that report, which will address all the issues that the proposal and seconder have made this evening. So
We a seconder for the amendment, please.
Yes, could I second the motion, and could I just have a few comments while I speak? I think, listening to the presentation tonight, there is a great deal that we need to consider, that Councillor Collins has said, and quite a lot to think about. And clearly there is merit in some of the arguments that he's made. However, I would say that the proper way of dealing with this in committee system would be that, and I'm disappointed that this hasn't come before the DM committee, which has a policy onto it, one committee, but two references there in terms of responsibilities. And I would think that it would be very appropriate that the committee, first and foremost, consider this particular proposal. And then, on merit, a judgment can be made as to whether we think this is something that is worth actually going through. So that would be my proposal as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Mulholland, please.
I'm speaking very much in support of Councillor Fylde's suggestion. I was fearing the vote tonight, and I wasn't quite sure which side of the house I was going to be on, because I wasn't convinced. I genuinely wasn't convinced. I've spent a few days bombarded with emails, and from the back end of last week or up to the close of today, I've been talking to everybody I could do to educate myself on this issue. And anybody, any of the senders of those emails, if they've been given the impression that this is some sort of a magic switch we can have the ability to refuse planning applications, please, Councillor Collins and others, please put them straight, because it isn't a magic fix by any means. There's a place not far down the M6 that had an appeal last year, and they showed a 5.5 year supply using the Sedgefield method. The inspector was happy with the methodology used, he was happy with the figures, he accepted that it was robust, and he accepted they had a 5.5 year supply. And he still allowed the appeal because he felt that the site was quite a good site, with a sustainable site. As Councillor Fylde said, this government want to build us out of recession. They want to build us a strong economy by physically building, and I don't think they really care about where that is. So, and when all's said and done, don't forget, this is one aspect of what an appeal inspector would consider. Now, if it gave us the strength to refuse and not worry about appeal, that would be different, but it won't do, of course. They'll still appeal. If we were to swap to the Liverpool method, my worry is that whereas last year our figures using the Sedgefield method were upheld at an appeal, and the inspector said, yes, our methodology was good, our figures, although not 5 years, 4 years something, our figures were robust, and he accepted our figures in preference to the figures of the appellant, with all his experts. So, you know, we're on the right track. Our argument's robust, our methodology is robust. It concerns me slightly if we go to the Liverpool method. We're starting again. And we need to be tested. And whether or not an appeal inspector will find that that is really suitable for Fylde, I mean, let's be fair, well, Blackpool might adopt that approach. Blackpool is so different, it couldn't be more different. So I'm very much swaying. I was worried because I was leaning towards voting against the notice of motion, simply because I think better to stick with the robust figures that we've got and try and go for the 5 year supply. But something in me didn't want to throw away the chance if the Liverpool method will work for us. So please, go with Councillor Fylde's suggestion, let it come to committee, let's have a full report on it, and let's go through all the facts, and then make a more educated decision. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Rhodes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I'm happy to support the amendment as long as it's not just kicking the question into the long grass. And I hope that the offer is being made genuinely to look into this. I did raise this with Councillor Fylde 2 or 3 months ago, and he told me if I could go away and show him that this had been tested, that we could perhaps look at it. And I think that Councillor Collins has very ably shown that it has been tested. It's been tested at appeals, it's also been tested in the High Court. So I'm delighted to look into this and get all the full information on it, and I hope that the committee will have the sense to go along with the Liverpool method. I hear what Councillor Mulholland has said. He's saying that the builders are trying to build us a strong economy, but they're not. They're not building. That's the reason we will never achieve the 5-year supply if we stick with the Sedgefield method, because the builders are simply not building the houses, and if they don't build the houses, we can't count them in our 5-year supply figure. So I hope that we'll look at this very, very carefully, and I hope that we'll come up with a favourable response, but obviously that needs to be looked at. I hope it will be looked at very quickly, and I certainly will support the amendment.
I didn't say the builders, I said the government.
No, I wrote down that it said
Councillor Race.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I stand to support the amendment purely because we have organised a committee system, and by voting tonight, and I'm not going to mention about facts and figures of which method's better. By voting tonight on this particular amendment that was put forward by Councillor Collins, we're setting a precedent, really, by passing the committee system. So, in all honesty, let's debate it. Let's get down to the facts. It is quite a complex issue. Let's face it, I wonder how many colleagues here know exactly what the Sedgefield method or the Liverpool method really are. I mean, could you honestly debate that thoroughly and understand it thoroughly? So the correct method is send it back to the DM committee and for them to bring it back to us.
Thank you. Councillor Andrews, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of weeks ago, we had an appeal for 49 houses in Great Green. We lost that appeal, and that was the third appeal that we've lost. So we're now in a 635 dwelling village, have 241 approvals. So it seems to me that the planning is simply not working. The DMC voted against this, the local people in Great Green voted against it, and the planning system at the moment is clearly not working. We have 5,000 houses approved in the file, over 5,000. That really ought to be 5 years supply. But because of the way of the calculation, it isn't. Again, I have to say, this isn't working. And the proposal here is for this backlog of 735 houses to be spread over a longer period. If it is spread over a longer period, there is a chance that we will meet a 5-year supply. If we don't do that, we won't even meet a 5-year supply for a long time, and we will be losing application after application. Indeed, you might as well not have a planning department. Councillor Fylde tells us that the Liverpool method is a preferred methodology. Well, it might be the preferred methodology, but it doesn't mean to say it's the only way of doing it. And I have grave concerns about any other action than to support Councillor Collins' suggestion.
Thank you. Councillor
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. I'm standing to speak in favour of the amendment proposed by Councillor Fylde, which I think is the sensible way to go about looking at this. But I would like to thank Councillor Collins for the way in which he presented his case. I thought he raised some very interesting, and for the notice of motion itself, I think he raised some very interesting matters which could help Fylde and other councils in relation to this 5-year housing supply problem. But having said that, with the way that the motion is put, that with immediate effect this council adopts the Liverpool approach, I couldn't possibly support that. That would mean adopting this approach tonight without the option of looking at this in the detail that it requires. So whilst I'm very interested in exploring this matter further, with a full report on the potential consequences of changing the methodology that we currently use, and what that would mean for us in terms of potential repercussions at appeal, all those issues need to need to be looked at and properly examined. I do think that it is properly a matter to be looked at in that detail by the relevant committee, where we can give it the time and attention to detail that it needs. As Councillor Nolte pointed out in seconding Councillor Collins, she said this Liverpool method will need some looking into. Well, that's precisely what needs to happen before the council makes any decision to adopt this as the approach. If it needs looking into in some detail, then we need to do that. You don't decide to do something and then look into the detail of it afterwards for the potential repercussions. But I agree that this shouldn't really be looked at. It's certainly not been treated tonight, I don't think, as a party political issue. I think you can probably gather, Councillor Collins, that there's a lot of interest in what you've had to say on this side as it well. In fact, you just heard Councillor Andrews speak robustly in favour of what you're proposing. So I think there's real value in bringing this to the DM committee for proper examination of the issues. We can hopefully thrash this out, look at it in some detail, and then come back to the full council with a recommendation or not. So I will be supporting the amendment to the motion proposed by Councillor Fylde.
Thank you. Councillor Nolte, please.
Yeah, yes, I did say that, because obviously nothing would go straight forward, but I would prefer that decision to really go for it to have been taken tonight. But I am happy with the amendment and that to take it to committee and for the committee to look at it properly. As Councillor Mulholland rightly says, we still face the government's sustainable argument, but at least with this method, as I said, it would give us some breathing space, and we'd at least have the chance to look for real reasons for refusal. So often we cannot refuse things because of this 5-year supply, or we lose them at appeal straight away because we haven't got a 5-year supply. At least we'd be starting from a place that we wanted to be, with our real arguments about why we don't want things where we don't want them, if and when that applies. And I'm not saying in any way that we should, if we get the 5-year supply, we should just refuse everything, because we know that won't work, and we'd face appeals. But at least this would give us an opportunity to look at things properly. And yes, somebody referred to the emails. I've had at least 30 emails at the last count from different parts of the borough. The people of particularly the rural Fylde, are looking for us to do something, to do anything that we can to improve this situation. I know it's being faced all over the country, but if we can do something to move things forward for our residents, then that would be a good day for us. And at least this notice of motion might fail, but at least it's brought it to the attention of everybody here, and I hope everybody will go away with some knowledge of what's going on and think about this vital subject. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Becker.
Yes, Mr Mayor. Councillor Fylde has put his notice of motion forward. I've listened to everything that's gone on, but at the end, amendment, that when Councillor Aiken stood up and then he brought it in, that it would go to committee, then come back to this council, I want that writing in, that is what's got to happen. It just doesn't go to the committee and then it comes back to this council, so everybody knows exactly where we stand and everything that's being done with it. Because it is disastrous in the rural Fylde what's happening at the moment. And the housing plan is just going out through the window, and it definitely is. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Singleton.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm of the opinion the Liverpool method is in expanding the housing plan in line with the local plan, as to say it's better over 17 years than 5 years is credible. However, I would say on a point of order, because we have this committee system in being now, I agree it should go to the committee first before it comes before the next council. Right, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to ask some guidance, please, from the monitoring officer, because it's been mentioned about the mechanism for decision making going to DM, the policy committee, and my understanding is that that body is able to make decisions. So it may be that it goes to that committee and the decision is made. I'm not certain that it needs to come back to full council unless it comes back as part of the full local plan in consideration of that. And it would be useful to have that cleared up because members are asking questions on the mechanism.
It's largely up to members. It is within the committee's remit to make the decision, but also if the amendment wished to refer it back to council for it to be debated here, that would be within the remit of the proposer of the amendment. And it might be helpful for Councillor Fylde to read his amendment out again so everybody could just be clear exactly what that entailed.
Thank you for those comments. I just ripped it up. So. Did I preempt or was I mistaken? I have no problem not wanting to repeat the question because I can stick it together again. I have no problem with it coming back to this council. It's an issue which affects every part of Fylde. I think I did make the point that the committee will meet before the 31st of March because we are directed by government to review our 5-year policy annually, and that annual time and date is the 31st of March. So this will feed into that review. And there are other factors that will impact on the final 5-year policy. We talk about the 20% buffer, is it a 20% buffer, is it a 5% buffer, delivery rates by developers and sites. So there's not just one question that will be determined by the DM committee. It will be a composite of several issues all coming together.
Councillor Fylde prepared an amendment, some of that amendment, it doesn't have the right to come back. This is pointed out to the last council.
I think the monitoring officers asked him to clarify his amendment, which is a point of clarification rather than a point of order. You will get a chance to sort Councillor Collins as the proposed in the original motion.
The simple point, and I can't understand the intervention from Councillor Collins, the simple point I'm making is that the review on the 31st of March, other issues will be reviewed at the same time as the controversy between the Liverpool and the Sedgefield methodologies. The conclusion of that committee should come back to full council. We have delegated powers, but I am saying that the decision will come back to this full council because the decision is so important, it impacts on all areas of the borough. And what's controversial about that from Councillor Collins, I do not know.
Councillor Hayes, please.
Well, I appreciate what Councillor Fylde has said, and he's quite happy for it to come back to full council, and it does seem as though it is sensible for it to go back and for it to be dealt with at committee and with a recommendation to full council. The only thing that I would ask, Mr. Mayor, is the proper timescale there to get everything in place by the 31st of March? Because obviously the fact is that the committee meets and then it's got to go back to full council. Presumably we would have to have the result by the 31st of March. Is that feasible, or can that be done? Because if not, it would then make sense that the committee makes the decision.
Councillor Collins.
Could I ask the question answered, please? Because obviously what I want to know is, can it be done? Can it go to committee and come back in time for full council in order to get a decision by the 31st of March, which I understand is required?
Thank you, Councillor Hayes. I do like to remind members that this is a debating chamber, not a Q&A session, but I can clarify that. As I understand, the annual review starts getting calculated from the 31st of March. It is possible to go to the next cycle of committee meetings and come to the full council on April the 11th. I don't think March the 31st, having spoken to the planning officers, is a cut-off date on which we must have that annual review done. I believe it takes several weeks to actually finalise the figure. So it is time frame. Thanks.
Councillor Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In answer to Councillor Mulholland, I know Blackpool's different to Fylde, but housing need is housing need, be it in Blackpool, be it in Fylde, wherever it is. And the principle, if the principle's good in Blackpool, it's good in Fylde. They've had, as I said earlier, they've had their core strategy examined in public and it's been found to be sound. What is important here is how you jiggle the figures. But it's not fiddling, it's how you address them. And you can actually work it out the numbers, the difference between using one methodology and another methodology. Using the Sedgefield method, you have a need of 517 a year. If I go to the Liverpool method, it comes out to 487, which is only 30 less. About 30 a year is enough to get us over the line. Now, 517, I believe, is unattainable. I believe 487 is unattainable. But if 517 is possible, the guidance to the FPPF says where possible. So it must be possible to get 517, but it's definitely possible to get to 487. I would have liked to have a vote on this tonight. I believe the consensus of opinion amongst councillors is perhaps to let it go back to committee, but see how the vote on the amendment progresses. Thank you.
Mr Mayor, I think it would be helpful if I summed up what I feel that the amendment is. That is to defer to allow for a full report on this matter to be considered by the Development Management Committee prior to the 31st of March, with a report on this matter coming back to the next available council meeting, which would be on April the 11th. So that is the amendment. Sorry, Mr Mayor, we did have a request from Councillor Nolte when the original proposition was in play that you indicated that you were seeking a recorded vote on that. I'm not sure whether anybody's seeking a recorded vote on the amendment. Otherwise, I'll just take that as a show of hands.
Right. We'll now take the vote then on the amendment first. All those in favour of the amendment, please show. Anyone against? That is clearly carried.
Mr Mayor, just on a technicality, this now becomes your substantive motion, so unless anybody then indicates any differently, that they would vote any differently, I will just take that is now approved as your substantive motion.
Nobody indicates right, so that's a substantive motion. Thank you. Item number 9, an invitation to accept appointment as Mayor of Fylde for 2016-2017. May I invite Councillor Small to introduce this item, please.
Mr Mayor, I'm standing to propose that Councillor Mrs Christine Aykroyd be invited to accept appointment at the 2016 annual meeting as Mayor of the Borough of Fylde for the municipal year 2016-2017. Thank you.
Councillor Wilde. Sorry,
I'm okay. I'm easily okay. Thank you, Mr Mayor, and I'm very happy to second this.
All those in favour? Duly carried. Item 10, invitation to accept appointment as Deputy Mayor for 2016-17. I'd like to invite Councillor Aykroyd to introduce this item, please.
Mr Mayor, it is my pleasure, and whether it's a privilege or not will remain to be seen, but to invite Councillor Andrew to be Deputy Mayor for the following municipal year.
Councillor Buckley.
I'm very happy to second that.
All those in favour? Thank you very much. Congratulations to both the ladies. Item 11, financial forecast update. May I invite Councillor Buckley to introduce this item.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. This item starts on page 19 of the agenda papers. First of all, I'm advised that the recommendations should state that Council are recommended to approve the updated financial forecast, not to note it. It was noted before the Finance and Democracy Committee. It then comes to full Council for approval. So, with your permission, Mr Mayor, I'd like to alter that recommendation to say to approve. Thank you. Colleagues, as is set out in the report, the direction of the Council finances is changing. The core grant is being phased out by 2020 and 100% retention of business rates revenue will be introduced. The details on the division of that between upper tier, lower tier authorities or even combined authorities is awaited, along with details of the new responsibilities that will fall upon local government. In the meantime, the current business rates retention scheme will continue, and our forecast includes indicative figures at the baseline level. The government, as members will know, has proposed a 4-year settlement, which is a significant and welcome change from previous 1- or 2-year allocations, and it is conditional upon the Council publishing an efficiency plan. However, the settlement for Fylde represents a reduction in core spending power over the next 4 years of 14.1%, and yet this factors in a council tax rise of 1.75% per year. Also, we must note that the picture for future new homes bonus is very uncertain at present, with the government consulting on significant changes in order to achieve additional savings. The options are set out in the report before you on page 18, and the consultation runs into March, and therefore it may be some time after that before the outcome is known. A consultation on the new homes bonus a couple of years ago ran with an option of reductions in funding of some significant sums, but in the event and following the consultation, no changes were made. We cannot therefore second guess the outcome of the present consultation, and so the figures used in the forecast are those provided by the government in the indicative settlement. The other financial risks are set out briefly on page 21, but have been further explored in the previous full report to Council in December, and a link is provided to that document. In the usual format, the appendices to this document will set out the 5-year forecast, firstly in Appendix A, which is as set by last year's Budget Council, and then the changes that have taken place, together with an explanation of those changes, in order to arrive at the latest forecast at Appendix E. Our finances remain robust, and as ever, Council must be cognizant of the risks. I thank the finance team, headed up by Paul O'Donoghue, and all budget holders who constantly seek to right-size their budgets and find efficiencies. I move the recommendation, Mr Mayor, to approve the forecast, and I second.
Thank you, Councillor Small.
Mr Mayor, I don't know whether it's on this item or the next item, but I know that on page 31 we're showing that the business rates will basically prop up the budget requirements in future in the way that the government is now deciding to allocate business rates, even though we are going to also have to use balances, which will show that our balances will reduce by 50% over the 4 years. What concerns me, though, is on the next item, which is the corporate plan, where we're saying that we're going to channel, I think the word is channel business rates funding opportunities to economic development. It seems as though we need every penny to prop up the general rate fund. So, could I ask, what are we going to use the money twice, or is that or is the corporate plan incorrect?
Does anyone else wish to speak? Councillor Small, do you wish to?
No, I think, like everybody else, we're in a period of uncertainty, particularly with these business rates. It does sound on the one hand like it's a potential good opportunity. On the other hand, it's like everything else with central government, giving one hand into the back of the other. I think it's up to the good officers of Fylde and this council to make sure that these finances stay as robust as we can. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just to answer that particular question, we are budgeting at a baseline level moving forward. If we are successful in achieving economic growth such that income from business rates is above and beyond that, we will retain a proportion of that. Indeed, that has been the case previously, not this present year, it's been a previous year where we have had income from business rates above and beyond our forecast, and we have made a decision to channel that into economic development. So the opportunity is that if we achieve economic growth, then we will receive income beyond the baseline level, and that is the opportunity to channel into further economic. Thank you.
Take the vote on that. All those in favour of what Councillor Buckley's put forward, please show. You against? No abstentions, that's fully carried. Thank you. Item 12, the corporate plan. I'd like to invite Councillor Fazakerley to introduce this item.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Mr Mayor, colleagues, as we are all aware, this is the first corporate plan that has been produced following the reintroduction of the committee system. Under the cabinet system, the draft corporate plan was the result of the combined efforts of officers and cabinet members, and the finished product would be adopted at the appropriate cabinet meeting for recommendation to full council, where it would be approved. Under the new system, the initial draft was developed by the leading group, with professional advice from officers. It does not involve starting from scratch, because it requires outcomes that are requirements for all district councils, for example, the local plan, clean bathing waters, and waste cost sharing. Ongoing commitments from the previous corporate plan, such as in bloom and sea defence, and revised priorities and achievements aimed at improving the Fylde community. The initial draft was then circulated to all members at the end of September, with a 2-month window for comment. It appeared on all committee agendas and as an information item for comment, suggestion and feedback. There was an opportunity for members of staff to provide feedback, and the document also was circulated to key partners, including CBS, Fire and Wire CCG, police, fire, as well as several main employers including BAE, Westinghouse and Danborough. It was available as online for consultation and feedback up to December 2015. The comments were circulated to all members. The feedback was considered by the leading group and some changes were made before the final draft that you have before you as Appendix 2 was produced. Despite some criticism of this system, I think it fair to say that it has been far more inclusive than the previous process. Although the initial document was created by the leading group, the group whom the electorate chose to spearhead the council for the next 4 years, but every elected member has had several opportunities for input. I found it very disappointing that only 2 non-conservative members provided any feedback at the consultation stage. One of the facilitators from the Local Government Association, the Local Government Support Lead Advisor, at the workshop held for members of the leading group last autumn has commented, "The leading group in any local authority, regardless of political persuasion, has the right/mandate to initiate policy development and direction for the council. They have the mandate to lead. Provided that there are mechanisms for engagement, scrutiny and checks, this is the normal process in the everyday operation of every local authority the LGA has worked with. The proposals for the corporate plan were included for consultation on every committee agenda and sent direct to every elected member and several partners. This represents the opportunity to engage, as well as the opportunity for scrutiny on at least 6 occasions. He also said that he found it hard to understand exactly what the challenge is in respect to the process in developing the corporate plan, having the view that in his opinion it is as inclusive as anywhere he has worked on behalf of the LGA. Colleagues, you see before you the 2016-2020 corporate plan in the plan on the page format, which has proved to be the most popular form with members, customers and users over the past few years. It is a user-friendly summary of the strategic direction the Council is taking and the commitments for the period of the plan, together with the key actions that are currently being implemented to achieve strategic outcomes. The plan is reviewed annually for monitoring and updating purposes, and the outcomes presented to the full Council for approval. Mr. Mayor, I consider that this corporate plan is an excellent blueprint for Fylde for the next 4 years. It is a working document to be regularly monitored and updated, into which all members have had several opportunities to contribute. I am happy, therefore, to propose its adoption, and I have a second. Thank you.
Councillor Wood.
I'm very happy to second the proposal and reserve my right to speak.
Anyone wish to speak? Councillor Rose.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move an amendment, please. And it is that this incarnation of the corporate plan is received but not accepted by the full council as its corporate plan for the years 2016 to 2020. This document is not a corporate plan. It's a Conservative Party plan prepared by a single political party and its content does not, and cannot be said to, represent the spectrum of opinion that is the full council, because the evidence on which it's based and the options available to be considered were presented to and debated by only one political party within the council. And indeed, it wasn't even placed on committee agendas as an item for debate, only for information. No information was provided, no cross-party debate took place about whatever issues and options might have been in earlier drafts of the plan, and it's not been offered for amendment to those outside the majority party. Whilst we accept that governance is the right of the majority, over a third, actually 37%, of Fyle's democratically elected councillors, each of whom hold an equal mandate from the electorate, have been denied their natural right to sharing and contribute to the preparation of this high-level document. You have therefore denied all the many thousands of people who voted for us a right to be represented. This cannot be said to be a process that has delivered a corporate plan. Councillors who were not members of the majority party were denied all knowledge of the issues and options proposed and considered, and have been unable to either support or disagree with what the majority party has set out as its plan for Fylde. We're told that the Conservatives held an away day to discuss the plan. No such opportunity was afforded to those of us on this side of the chamber. What was this away day? What was its status? Who authorised it? If it was training, then why wasn't it offered to members of all groups? It wasn't a steering group or joint committee or a partnership body. It wasn't a subcommittee or working party, as no committee nominated members onto it. And it wasn't a chairman's briefing because there were no reports submitted. Surely it can't have been a political or group meeting because the council paid for the room hire and refreshments and officers were in attendance. This behaviour is appalling. It's one we've come to expect from this administration. It's arrogant in the extreme. It's not only contemptible and offensive, it's beneath even you. You now have a comfortable majority on the council, so there's no need for this type of behaviour, and I can only believe that you find it enjoyable. I think that the public would be appalled if they could see these bully boy tactics. I'm sure they expect us to work together with their best interests at the forefront of our minds, not scoring pathetic points. It's time you grew up and remembered why you're here. I believe that the process used to produce this plan was wrong. It represents a failure of both natural justice and good governance, and it's failed to produce a plan that the whole of the council can support or even accept. I move this amendment and I ask for a recorded vote.
We're seconder for this amendment.
I'm happy to second that. I have been disappointed at the way this has been approached by the leading group, with it being brought to committees for information only and not for debate. The opportunity was there to allow a debate at each committee, but it was not taken up. This is not an open and inclusive and transparent approach, being debated and approved only by the leading group, a cabinet by any other name. I did not send any comments in, I nearly did, but I felt I would be ignored as usual and deemed to have no useful input. As Councillor Oates has said, those of us who represent the majority of the rural areas have been denied the opportunity to have an input into this strategic plan, which is important for all areas and not just those represented by Conservative councillors. So I'm happy to second this.
Thank you. Anyone wish to speak on the amendment? Councillor Hayhurst.
Well, about half an hour ago in this council chamber, we discussed Councillor Collins' notice of motion, and I think it was unanimously agreed throughout the council that it would be an idea, a good idea, for the matter to be properly discussed in committees, so that we definitely got the right answers. Here we seem to be going the opposite direction. on the basis that whilst we have a committee structure which lends itself to providing a corporate plan, and the word is corporate, then the fact is that basically all members should have been involved. It obviously doesn't seem right that we work one way in one direction and the other way in the other direction. It does seem that we're doing things wrongly, and I can only say to the leading group to have a think about it again for next year. Make sure you are inclusive, that you do involve everybody. You probably still get the same result, but again, I can remember many years ago in this council, we had a councillor called Wilf Callan, who was the only Labour member, and I think he came up with so many good points that even the ruling group, which was Conservative in those days, adopted those points because he was listened to. And we are a council, we're a diverse council because we cover a huge area, and everybody from all those areas should be listened to in order to get a corporate plan. I ask you to have a think about it and come back with a different sort of policy next time.
Thank you. Councillor Lowry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I am supporting the statement. I would like to suggest a couple of changes to the report on page 33, paragraph 5. Where the word inclusive is used.
Excuse me, Councillor, we have to deal with the amendment, the first amendment first.
Right.
After the first amendment's been voted on one way or another, you can make further amendments. You can propose
I'm not
further
making
amendments.
an amendment. I just want to support the amendment as outlined in this.
Could we just check, are you speaking about the amendment or the substantive motion?
The substantive motion.
As I understand, the amendment is to take the item back to the committee. Read it to us. Sorry, Councillor Rhodes.
What do you want me to do?
I want to make it clear whether you're making an amendment or speaking to an amendment.
I'm speaking in favour of the motion.
Okay.
Can I still do that?
We're currently not debating the main motion, we're debating the amendment.
Yes, I'm debating that.
So you're speaking in favour of the amendment?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Perhaps on the lighter side, perhaps it isn't. I'm supporting the statement, and where it reads on page 33, paragraph 5, inclusive, I think the word exclusive should be used. And further on in that paragraph, where it reads providing every elected member, I think it should be providing only Conservative members the opportunity to input the corporate plan. I feel it's a sordid and quite a sad business, this. And one that doesn't reflect well on the democratic processes involved in local governance in Fylde. The fact is, the whole future direction of Fylde Borough Council and its corporate plan is verging on the dictatorial. A future that is eroding the democratic processes, and a future that's dimming the transparency in Fylde Borough Council. The people of this borough expect and deserve an open democracy, not a closed shop. That is why I'm supporting this statement. Mr. Mayor, that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Councillor Silver.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A number of times this evening, members have referred to the new committee system, and they've used that to say, okay, we've not got the cabinet now, we've got the committee, that's where we make decisions. I think it's absolutely vital that Councillor Rhodes has put this amendment forward this evening, because it seems the only opportunity that we can to have a look at this again and debate it. I remember speaking at the Finance and Democracy meeting, and I was aggrieved, as other members were, that we were only allowed to note the item on the agenda. It was challenged, and it still didn't make any difference. I remember that evening we had an item on the agenda that we all, if we were honest, thought was rather minor, but we gave it probably 40 minutes of debate. Yet something as serious as the corporate plan, something that will affect every single person, every resident that votes for us in this borough, we've only been given the opportunity to note it. We've been criticised this evening that only 2 members, not on the Conservative side, put suggestions forward. None of those suggestions put forward by 2 non-Conservatives have been accepted in the corporate plan. Again, this should be one of those things that, as Councillor Fylde asked, to take the notice of motion back to the committee and to debate it, because it is so serious. This again should be something like that, and not hurried through and just on political balance. I am appalled to hear about this away day. We should have answers to those questions that Councillor Owens asked. We should have answers as to, have our residents paid for this jolly that the Conservatives have attended? That is certainly, well, you're frowning at me. Well, it may not have been very jolly. Perhaps it would have been jollier if everybody was there, and then it had been more interesting, perhaps. At least it would have been livened up. So I think we all deserve answers to those questions. We're always talking about us being a transparent council, and I think it's absolutely crucial that those answers are given. And jolly or not, is something we should all be aware of. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have to confess, I mean, I won't be voting in favour of the amendment, and I have to say, I think there's a manifest absurdity in the amendment that's been put forward, and a fundamental misunderstanding of how democratic processes work in this country. Please allow me just to expand for a moment. What happens at different tiers of government? You imagine the national government, the electorate votes a particular government in. Now, that government, the elected government, then sets the priorities for legislation for the next however many years they're going to be in, and their vision for the country going forward. Imagine if David Cameron, before he wanted to introduce a piece of legislation, or the Conservatives, before they wanted to introduce a piece of legislation, had to first consult with Jeremy Corbyn and say, we're thinking of doing this, can we have your input into our legislation first, before we decide what we're going to do in the country for the next 5 years? It would be absolutely absurd and ridiculous. The way Parliament operates, it has committees.
Can we stick to the point, please?
Well, indeed, and I believe I am doing, Mr. Mayor, that the committees scrutinise what's put forward. It works in the same way, but a further tier down. Now, I believe that the leader, Councillor Fazakerley, listed exhaustively the opportunities that have been given for all members to have some input into the plan. I think it's right, it's how democratic processes work, that the leading group would look to set the vision. They have consulted, and we have consulted, and it is a shame that only 2 non-Conservative elected members did submit their comments. So I really do think this amendment is an absurdity, and I certainly can't support it.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak? Councillor Zachary, would you like to sum up the amendment? On the amendment.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm in a state of shock, really, because I think I must have been speaking in a foreign language for people to have misunderstood what I've been saying. 6 occasions for non-leading group members to contribute. How much can I think is that continuous backdrop from behind?
Can we have one meeting, please?
The words of the lead advisor for the Local Government Association, which isn't a Conservative organisation, it's a local government association, as inclusive as anywhere he has worked with on behalf of the LGA. It is normal practice for the leading group of any local authority to take the lead. They have a mandate to lead. Those aren't the words of the Conservative group, those aren't my words, they're the words of an independent government body. We have a mandate to lead, and somebody had to kick off the process. And the leading group, apparently all over the country, that is what happens. That the leading group kicks off the process and then invites comment and input from other members of the council. Now, I'm sorry, I'm not going to be an apologist for what has happened. I think we did the right thing. I think we tried to be inclusive. I genuinely think we tried to be inclusive. But obviously, we failed, or our intentions were misinterpreted, the opposition are unhappy with what's happened. I have no more to say except, in the words of Luther, here I stand, I cannot do otherwise. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
We'll take a vote on the amendment. No, sorry. Take the vote on the amendment. All those in favour of the amendment? Have we enough councillors wish to have a recorded vote?
That's fine.
Thank you. Recorded vote on the amendment. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, would it be helpful if I just read out the amendment?
Yes, it will. Thank you.
That this incarnation of the corporate plan is received but not accepted by the full council as its corporate plan for the years 2016 to 2020. And I'll read through the names of elected members, and when I call out your names, if you could indicate if you are for, against or abstaining, please. Councillor Ben Aitken.
Against.
Councillor Christine Ackroyd.
Against.
Councillor Frank Andrews.
Against.
Councillor Peter Anthony.
Against.
Councillor Timothy Ashton.
Against.
Councillor Jan Barker. Councillor Keith Beckett.
For.
Councillor Brenda Blackshaw. Councillor Julie Brickles. Councillor Karen Buckley. Councillor Maxine Chu. Councillor Alan Clayton. Councillor Daniel Collins. Councillor Peter Collins. Councillor Michael Corner.
Against.
Councillor David Donaldson. Councillor David Eaves. Councillor Super Zachary. Councillor Trevor Fydler.
Against.
Tony Ford. Councillor Richard Bradley.
Against.
Councillor Shirley Green.
Against.
Councillor Neil Harvey.
Against.
Councillor Paul Hayhurst.
For.
Councillor Karen Henshaw. Councillor Paul Hodgson. Councillor Angela Jakes. Councillor Cheryl Little. Councillor Roger Lloyd. Councillor Kieran Mulholland. Councillor Barbara Nash. Councillor Edward Nash. Councillor Linda Nolte. Councillor Elizabeth Oates. Councillor Sandra Pittman. Councillor Albert Pounder. Councillor Richard Redcliffe. Councillor Lewis Rigby. Councillor Vin Settle. Councillor Elaine Silverwood. Councillor John Singleton. Councillor Roger Lloyd. Councillor Richard Taylor. Sorry.
Sorry.
Councillor Vivian Wilder, and the Mayor, Councillor Peter Hardy. Okay, just one moment, please. The amendment is lost. There were 30 against with 16 for. So we are now back to the substantive motion.
Back to substantive motion, yes. Anyone wish to speak? Councillor Hayhurst.
Well, Mr. Mayor, it's the point that I made previously, which Councillor Buckley gave an explanation with regard to the business rates, when she said that the situation is that if we experience growth, then obviously they would channel the business rates, or some of the business rates, through to economic development. The only thing is, the schedule that was shown to us on page 31 of the financial report showed us that in those 4 years that the balances were being reduced by 50%. I feel it's a very dangerous thing to start committing possible growth at a time when our balances are being decimated. And I feel really that we should take the wording out, which would give us far more flexibility, whether or not we wish to put the money back into the balances or wish to use it for any other purposes. So I would like to move that we take out the wording, which is the middle column of Appendix 2, which says channel business rates funding opportunities to economic development. Again, the point I'm trying to make is that we're committing money when our balances are going down at a frightening rate. And I feel that we should leave the opportunity to obviously allocate those balances, those business rates in a different way if need be.
Anyone else wish to speak? Councillor Rhodes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, Councillor Harvey actually illustrated exactly the point I made, because what he referred to is a manifesto. It's what the government puts forward as a manifesto. This is supposedly a corporate plan, and it means a body corporate, the council. The plan appears not to have allocated or apportioned resources to any of the actions proposed. It has no measurable targets, no financial implications, and no predefined success criteria. It's not a plan, it's an aspiration, which is not to be welcomed in relation to the highest level strategic document that the Council produces. A corporate plan can have no credibility if it's prepared by only one part of the Council. It's therefore not corporate. It's not a plan because the process to implement it, the resources it will require, and the outcomes that will be measured to assess its performance are all unknown.
Councillor Edward Nash.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've seen quite a few plans in my time. I'm involved in a lot of plans in my time. And what are the essentials of a good plan? Various statesmen on this. Von Clausewitz, who founded the Prussian army, declared that few plans will survive encounters with the enemy. Winston Churchill, our great Prime Minister and a Conservative, said, no plan is out unless you can put it on one sheet of paper. And he had the plan for D-Day put on one sheet of paper. This plan, whatever you say about it, whatever the politics, is probably one of the most comprehensive ones that I've seen, and it's easy to digest, it's easy to look at, easy to follow. And we've built in flexibility, which is what we're talking about there, in that any plan must be a living thing, it must be able to be altered. Our committee system is set up so that we can look at this, we can alter it, we can bring it back, and we can make it react to events as they happen. So I think on one sheet of paper, this is an excellent plan. I recommend it to the council.
Anyone else? Councillor Harvey.
Yes, thank you again, Mr. Mayor. I'll keep my comments brief this time, which I'm sure will be welcomed on the other side. But I would simply observe that it's a shame if Councillor Rose is so passionate about the corporate plan that she didn't mobilise her troops more effectively to respond to the consultation. The opportunity was there for comment, and in terms of saying that this only represents a certain portion of the ward, the portion of the borough, the portion that's conservative, then I would have to say that you've not represented your portion very well. The opportunity was there, you've been elected to represent your ward, and by not responding and taking advantage of the opportunity to have more input into it, I have to say, there's been a neglection of your duties and responsibilities to the people who elected you.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'm sure the other side know what I'm going to say. Rallying the troops, just remind you that we are independents, and we don't get rallied, we don't follow a whip. But again, it's getting rather repetitive, so I won't bore the pants off you, as you seem to be doing that to us on this side, other than to say we tried at every committee to debate. That's where it should have been allowed. That's where it was democratic. They were the opportunities, the committee meetings, not just to note. So if any lessons have been learned, as Councillor Hayhurst said before, they should have been debated. If there was nothing to hide, then they were the places, not just to simply note, spend 5 seconds, everybody gather the papers up because it's 9 o'clock, everybody wants to go home, they're hungry. No, we should have debated them at each committee meeting. That is the problem. And the troops could have responded there in the committee meetings.
Thank you. Councillor Moore.
I have to say, I do slightly agree with some of Councillor Harvey's comments. The Conservatives have a mandate, and the majority of the administration, I would fully expect them to start the ball rolling with the corporate plan, quite honestly. I don't see any reason why that shouldn't have gone for debate at committee, as opposed to be noted, but it wasn't. However, there does seem to be an ample opportunity to have an input for those that wanted an input. I tend to not place too much importance on the local plan. Sorry, people say how important it is. To me, it's all fluffy clouds and ice cream and apple pie. Bull comes to mind for me. None of it's specific, none of it's how we're going to do it, none of it's detailed. We want everybody to walk around with a happy smile on their face. Yeah, that's absolutely good. We want everybody to be healthy, you know. We want to empty everybody's bins and do it efficiently, yeah. All those things, everything's on there, you could argue with. Not to do them all. But none of it's detailed. For me, it's when we get to details that I'm interested in. And usually that is when it comes up. Not usually, hopefully that's always when it comes to committee. And that's when I'll show interest. Until then, you know, I thank the Conservatives are coming up with this wonderful document, which I think is totally non-specific, they're all very happy, smiling, and you know, it may evolve, it may not, but one thing, there's not much on there that anybody will challenge, so I think that what they've done is not unexpected, and the guy from the LGA seems to think they've done marvellously well and has been as inclusive as anybody could be. I'm not going to argue that either way, but I'd like to make progress because I want to go home.
Thank you for that. Anyone else? May I ask Councillor Buckley if she would like to say anything before I ask Councillor Fazakerley to sum up? No, thank you. Councillor Fazakerley.
much to say at this point. I'm not an apologist for this corporate plan. This corporate plan had no secret agenda. I think the opposition are trying to make us feel as if we've been involved in something furtive and undercover and something that's only benefiting the tourism world, which is absolute and complete nonsense. We felt, or we feel, that what we have produced is a good, high-level plan for the next 4 years. Those of you that have been on the council for a while will remember, although it doesn't sound like it, that previous corporate plans for the last few years have been very similar, and there's never been such a song and dance about a corporate plan before. In fact, it's kind of just gone past on the nod, almost. That remark has been made to me by a number of people. They cannot understand the fuss about this corporate plan, which is in essence and in format so similar to our previous corporate plans. I stand by this corporate plan, Mr. Mayor. I am proud of it. I feel that the group has done a good job. I'm sorry that the opposition didn't contribute more to it. 6 opportunities, 6 occasions to contribute, total contributions 2. I have no more to say. I move the proposition.
Thank you. We'll go to the vote now for the proposal. All those in favour, please show. Against? Any abstentions? The motion's carried. Thank you. Item 13, pay policy statement. May I invite Councillor Buckley to introduce this item.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Taking Councillor Collins' points on board, I'll be brief. This is an annual pay policy statement that comes before the Council. It is set out in Appendix 1 fully for councillors, and I would also invite councillors to go on the website that's on page 43. You will see further details. You will see the ratios of pay and the pay above £50,000. So I move that the Council approve the pay policy statement for 2016.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I shall be brief, for I shall start to second that. Thank you.
Anyone wish to speak? Vote then. All those in favour, please show. Thank you. Against? That's duly carried, thank you. Item 14, schedule of meetings. Can I invite Councillor Fazackley to introduce this item, please?
Mr. Mayor, colleagues, a non-contentious item, hopefully. I'd like to propose the adoption of the proposed committee dates for the forthcoming municipal year, and I have a seconder.
Thank you. Councillor Buckley.
Happy to second that.
Thank you. Anyone wish to say anything? All those in favour then, please show. Thank you. Anyone against? Thank you. That's carried. Item 15, regulation of investigatory powers. May I invite Councillor Singleton to introduce this item, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The RIPPER Act gives lawful authority and approval to carry out surveillance on persons over 16 by certain authorities. And one of these authorities is local council. Authorisation is made by the Chief Executive in writing, and the authorising officer must apply to the Magistrates Court for approval. This present policy on tonight's papers was approved by members of this council in January 2015, and there's been no further changes to this policy since that date. The Audit and Standards Committee receive regular updates on this report, the last one being January 2016. The Act requires, it is a requirement that all members of the local authority should review and re-adopt the RIPA report at least once a year. And that's why it's on tonight's papers, Mr Mayor. So I propose we note the contents of the report and endorse the RIPA policy. And I have a seconder in Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm happy to second it.
Thank you. Anyone wish to speak? Take the vote. All those in favour? Be sure. Thank you. Anyone against? Thank you. Before I close the meeting, rather remiss, I should have said at the beginning, you've all had a questionnaire in front of you. It's a health thing from Councillor Barker. If you could fill it in, give it to Councillor Barker or leave it at the town hall, please. And also, I forgot to mention the mayor's announcements. Anyone who wishes to donate anything for the raffle or even the silent auction, I'd be very appreciative for that. And anyone who wishes tickets to go is to see the Mayor's Secretary, Joe Pauls. Thank you all. Close the meeting. Thank you. Good night.
Councillors, please, gentlemen, please feel standing.